I want to start today with something that happened to me on Threads. Now, I know I told you I was not going to be on social media, but as a researcher, I got things to experiment with, okay? So I posted two things, same topic, same woman I'm always talking to, same me behind the words. And one of them got engagement, women nodding, commenting, sharing, etc. And the other one, crickets. And I sat there genuinely confused because from where I was sitting, both posts were saying something true. Both of them were coming from the same 17 years of research. Both of them were about identity. Both of them were for her. So why did one of them land and the other didn't? I started analyzing it the way I analyze everything, looking at the structure, the framing, the words I chose. And somewhere in that process, I stopped thinking about the posts and I start thinking about her, the woman reading. And I realized something that I genuinely was not prepared for. She couldn't recognize herself in the post that didn't land. Not because it wasn't true, not because it wasn't about her, but because she didn't have the language for what I was describing yet. And when you don't have language for something, you can't see yourself in it. It just floats past you like it's about somebody else. It goes right over your head. And that stopped me cold. It stopped me right in my tracks because I've been that woman my whole life. The one things float past. The one who nods along because that's what you're supposed to do. The one who hears something and thinks, I don't know if that's me. Not because it isn't, but because nobody ever gave her words for what she was actually experiencing. And right there, in my notes app, at whatever hour it was at night, I figured out something I've been circling for 17 years. And that was language. It was always language, not mindset, not habits, not confidence, not healing. Language. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean by that and why understanding it might be the most important thing that you do for yourself this year. Let's get into this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and many blessings to you. Welcome back to Ess and Flow by Shay. Too much for the room. And I have to be honest with you. This episode is different because I have finally, y'all, found the true flow of this body of work I've been creating. After 17 years, I now have language for what I have been actually studying all this time. Hi, I'm Shay Thomas, identity linguist, capacity strategist, human development researcher, and creator of Ess and Flow. Today, we're getting into the reason everything in your life keeps happening the same way and why the answer starts with language. Now let's get into it. Now, let me tell you something I noticed about myself when I'm consuming content. And I want you to pay attention to whether this is true for you too. There are 3 ways I respond to things I read or hear. The first one is the nod. Something lands and I just, agree. It feels familiar and it confirms something I already knew somewhere inside of me. I don't feel a lot of energy around it, just recognition. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. The second one is the perk. Something lands and I sit up. I lean in. I'm curious. I'm curious in a way that feels almost urgent. like my brain is reaching for something just outside its grasp. That post that made you stop scrolling, that sentence you read 3 times, that's the perk. That is a signal you want to pay attention to. And the third one, and this one I also want you to pay the most attention to, is what I call the mad. The post that made you put your phone down or want to throw it across the room, the sentence that hit differently, the thing somebody said that made you say, bruh, underneath your breath because you do that all the time and you've never even noticed. Now, here's what I want you to understand about those 3 responses. They are not just reactions, they are language signals. When you nod, you already have language for what you just encountered. It confirmed something named. When you perk, you're at the edge of your language. Something is trying to form. You're in the process of acquiring a new word for a real experience. And when you get mad, like big mad, that's your native self recognizing a pattern that's been running in you before you even had words for it. The anger arrives first because your body knows something your vocabulary hasn't caught up to yet. That anger is not a problem. That anger is data. That anger is actually the first sign of recognition. In recognition, now I need you to hear this, okay? Recognition is where everything begins. So now I want to take you somewhere with me. I want you to think about every time you heard something about Black women growing up. Not from one person, but from everywhere. Television, music, family conversations, school, church, the internet, social media, everywhere. And let me know, have you heard these things about Black women being ghetto, loud, aggressive, too much, angry, difficult, strong, unlovable, a lot to deal with? Now, I want you to notice something. You didn't hear those things just once. You've heard them hundreds and hundreds of times, thousands of times in different voices, different contexts, different packaging. But the message is still the same underneath. And here's what's happened. And this is where I need you to stay with me because this is the whole thing. It didn't just describe you. Eventually, it started to define who you are. But I want to get even more specific because it wasn't just the big cultural messages, it was the small ones too. The ones spoken directly at you, in your house, in your family, from the people who loved you. Fix your face. Don't talk back. Don't express your emotions like that. Who told you you could speak like that? You get it, right? Now I want you to sit with those for a second because those weren't just instructions about behavior. Those were language about who you were allowed to be, repeated consistently from authority in the space where your own self-description was supposed to be forming. Fix Your Face told you that your emotional expression was a problem. You Can't Talk Back told you that your perspective didn't have a right to exist in the room. Not being able to express your emotions told you that your feelings were too much, that the full experience of being you was something that needed to be managed and contained. And here's what I need you to understand. You didn't just hear those things. You learned them. You internalized them. And at some point, they stopped being things that were said to you and started being the things that you said to yourself. That is not suppression. I need to be very precise here because I spent years calling it suppression, and I was wrong. See, suppression is when you feel something and you push it down. The feeling still exists. You're just not expressing it. But what I'm describing here is different. What I'm describing is the language. When the language that was spoken over you repeatedly, authoritatively, from every which way and direction, replaced the language you were developing about yourself. Before you even had a chance to know who you were, someone else's words became your operating system. That is substitution. The words were first, then the behavior followed. They didn't change what you did, they changed who you believed you were. And from that belief, everything else grew. The shrinking, the performing, the overproducing, the over explaining, the fixing your face even when nobody asked you to anymore. And the mechanism, the thing that made it possible, the thing that made it stick, was language. Not trauma alone, not circumstance alone, language. Specifically, the language you heard the most. The language that went unchallenged. The language that filled the space where your own self-description should have been forming. This is why behavior change doesn't work the way we think it should. This is why you can do all the right things: therapy, journaling, affirmation, courses, coaching, and still find yourself showing up in ways that don't feel like you. Because you're trying to change the behavior without changing the language underneath. And the language is running the whole show. So let me bring this home for you. Because I don't want you to leave today with just an explanation. I want you to leave with something you can actually use. I use something I developed called the SORT method in my own life and in my research. And today I want to walk you through it, specifically through the lens of what we've been talking about in this episode. Let's start with S, perceive. The first step is to just see what's happening, not to fix it, not to judge it, just see it. And what I'm inviting you to see today is your language. Specifically, whose language are you living from right now? When you describe yourself, when you make decisions, when you shrink or expand in a room, what language is running underneath that? You might not be able to answer that immediately, and that's okay. The first step is just to look. Start noticing your 3 responses: the nod, the perk, and the mad. They are showing you where your language is settled, where it's forming, and where your native self is trying to get your attention. O, for observe. Once you see it, observe it without collapsing into it. Observation means you can watch the pattern without becoming it. You can notice, oh, I just fixed my face, without deciding that face fixing is who you are. You can notice, I just swallowed what I actually wanted to say, without making that silence your permanent identity. What you're observing specifically is what language triggered this response? What word, what phrase, what instruction caused you to shrink, perform, or disappear? Because that trigger is a map. It's showing you where the installed language is still running and where your native self is waiting underneath it. R, for reclaim. Here's the truth I want you to reclaim today. You were not born with a self-description. You were given one. And anything that was given can be examined. Anything that was installed can be recognized. And anything that can be recognized can be replaced, not with someone else's language, but with your own. Your native self has always been there. She didn't disappear when the installed language moved in. She just stopped being the loudest voice in the room. And she has been sending you signals this whole time through the perks, the anger, through the moments where something hit different and you couldn't explain why. The mad you felt reading this? Yeah, that was her. Reclaiming is not becoming someone new. It is learning to recognize the language that was already and always yours. And T for trust. And finally, trust. This is the step that requires the most from you because it asks you to act from language you're still learning. It asks you to make decisions from your native self when the installed language is louder. Even when the installed language feels more familiar. Even when the room was built around the installed version of you and the native version makes people uncomfortable. Trust that the recognition you're building is real. Trust that the anger you felt when you read that thing was data, not drama. Trust that the woman you keep almost being in moments of clarity, she is not a fantasy. She is the original. The words were first. That means the words can change. And when the language changes, everything built on top of it shifts with it. I spent 17 years trying to understand why things kept happening the same way, why I kept showing up in certain patterns, why certain environments felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit, why I could do all the right things and still feel like I was living someone else's life. And it took a quiet night, 2 threads, and an observation about why one landed and one didn't, to finally give me the word for what I had been studying all along. Language. Not language as a communication tool. Language as infrastructure. The invisible operating system underneath everything. And it's running. Identity, capacity, behavior, relationships, how you show up, what you believe you're allowed to have, who you think you are when nobody's watching. Fix your face. You don't get a voice. You can't talk back. Those words didn't just shape behavior. They shaped identity. They shaped your identity. And identity shaped everything. Essence Flow has always been about helping high capacity Black women reclaim who they actually are. And it took me a while to get to this place, but I'm here now. Because now I understand the mechanism. Now I know why she lost herself and how it happened and what the intervention point actually is. It was always language. And that means the work isn't to become someone new. The work is to learn a new language, specifically your own. If something in this episode made you nod, perk, or get mad, even just a little bit, that's your native self talking. Please pay attention to her. She has been trying to get your attention for a long, long time. If this episode named something you've been living, I want you to go deeper. Subscribe to the Too Much for the Room newsletter. Every Sunday, I'm dropping language for the things you've been carrying without words for them. You can see the link in the show notes. Find the full teaching on YouTube at Essence Flow by Shay. And if you want mini language drops between episodes, little breadcrumbs of language for things you've been living but couldn't name, follow me over on Threads and Instagram at Essence Flow by Shay. The path is there. Come find it. I'm Shay. This is Too Much for the Room. And I'll see you in the next episode.